He knelt before her on the restaurant's marble floor, tears streaming down his face as he held out not a ring, but a crumpled receipt. "This is where I knew," he whispered, his voice breaking. "This is where I knew you were testing me, and I've never been more grateful to fail someone's test. If you're wondering how a first date that started with deception ended with such raw emotion, stay with me. This story might change how you view love and judgment in today's superficial world. Like, subscribe, and join me on this journey about two people who discovered that true worth has nothing to do with price tags." Emma stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. Gone were her usual tailored blazers and designer dresses. Instead, she wore faded jeans with a small tear at the knee, scuffed sneakers, and an oversized sweater she'd purchased from a thrift store yesterday. Her normally styled hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her face was bare of makeup except for a touch of lip balm. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, adjusting the sweater that hung awkwardly on her frame. But the memory of her last 3 disastrous relationships strengthened her resolve. Emma Winters, at 32, had everything most people dreamed of: a thriving interior design business, a beautiful apartment in the city, and financial independence that had come from years of hard work after growing up with very little. What she didn't have was someone who loved her for herself, not for what she could provide. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Layla. "Are you really going through with this?" Emma typed back, "I have to know if he's different." She had met Daniel Park at a charity auction 2 weeks ago. He'd been there representing his community center, not as a wealthy donor like the others. Something about his genuine smile and the passionate way he spoke about his work with underprivileged youth had drawn her in. When he'd asked for her number, she'd given it without hesitation. But experience had made her cautious. Her last boyfriend had forgotten his wallet so often that Emma had eventually realized it was deliberate. The one before him had casually moved into her apartment within months, gradually reducing his work hours until he was essentially living off her success. And the first, the one who had hurt the most, had proposed with a ring she later discovered she had paid for through his liberal use of her credit card. So when Daniel suggested dinner at Bellini's, a moderately upscale Italian restaurant, Emma had formulated her plan. She would dress down, way down, and see how he reacted. Would he be embarrassed? Would he treat her differently? Would he suddenly remember an emergency and cut the evening short? The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Emma took a deep breath, grabbed her worn canvas tote instead of one of her designer handbags, and opened the door. Daniel stood there in dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt, a small bunch of wildflowers in his hand. His smile faltered for just a moment when he saw her, just long enough for Emma to feel a stab of disappointment, before returning full force. "These are for you," he said, handing her the flowers. "I picked them from the community garden. The kids helped me choose which ones to cut." "They're beautiful," Emma said, genuinely touched by the thoughtful gesture. No expensive roses or exotic arrangements, just simple wildflowers with a story behind them. "Our reservation is at 7:30, Daniel said as they walked to his car, a 10-year-old Honda with a dent in the passenger door. "I hope you like Italian." "I do," Emma replied, watching him carefully as he opened the car door for her. The drive to the restaurant was filled with easy conversation. Daniel asked about her day, told her funny stories about the teenagers at his center, and didn't once comment on her appearance. Emma began to relax slightly, though she remained vigilant. When they arrived at Bellini's, Emma noticed several well-dressed couples entering ahead of them. She felt increasingly self-conscious in her thrift store outfit but reminded herself that this was the test. The hostess gave Emma's attire a quick, dismissive glance before leading them to a table near the kitchen, not one of the better spots in the restaurant. Daniel either didn't notice or didn't care as he thanked the woman and held out Emma's chair. "Their pasta is made fresh daily," he said, opening his menu. "And the tiramisu is supposedly life-changing." Emma nodded, scanning the prices on the menu and noting that while not exorbitant, this was definitely not a cheap date. The waiter approached, his expression cooling slightly as he took in Emma's appearance. "Can I start you with some drinks this evening?" he asked, addressing Daniel directly. "Emma?" Daniel prompted, turning to her. "Just water for now, thank you," she said. "The same for me," Daniel told the waiter. "And we'd like to hear about the specials, please." As the waiter recited the evening's offerings, Emma noticed a couple at a nearby table staring at her and whispering. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, and she fought the urge to explain herself to them, to Daniel, to everyone in the restaurant. "The mushroom risotto sounds amazing," Daniel said when the waiter finished. "What do you think, Emma?" "I'll have the spaghetti marinara," she said, choosing one of the least expensive items on the menu. "And would you like to share an appetizer? The bruschetta here is excellent." Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." As they waited for their food, Daniel asked about her work. Emma had prepared for this, deciding to downplay her success. "I work in interior design," she said vaguely. "Mostly assistant work right now." "That sounds fascinating," Daniel replied. "What drew you to that field?" The genuine interest in his eyes made Emma elaborate more than she'd planned. "I've always believed spaces affect how people feel. Growing up, we moved a lot, and I became good at making even the smallest, plainest apartments feel like home with just a few touches." Daniel's expression softened. "That's a beautiful skill to have. Creating home for people." Their appetizer arrived, and Daniel insisted she take the first piece. Throughout the meal, he remained attentive and engaged, asking thoughtful questions and sharing stories about his own life. Growing up with immigrant parents who worked multiple jobs, his decision to become a social worker instead of pursuing the business degree his father had wanted for him, his dreams of expanding the community center's programs. Not once did he check his phone, look around at other diners, or seem anything but completely present with her. Emma found herself forgetting about her test, drawn into conversation with this man who listened as though her words were valuable. When the check came, Daniel reached for it immediately. Emma watched, waiting for the moment when he might suggest splitting it or, worse, when he might discover he'd forgotten his wallet. Instead, he simply placed his card in the folder and handed it back to the waiter without comment or hesitation. No show of wealth, no complaints about the price, just a simple transaction. As they left the restaurant, Emma noticed it had started to rain. Without a word, Daniel removed his jacket and held it over her head as they ran to his car. "You'll get wet," she protested. "I'll dry," he replied with a smile, making sure she was safely inside before running around to his side. In the car, with rain drumming on the roof, Emma felt a wave of shame wash over her. This man had been nothing but kind and genuine all evening, and she had been testing him, judging him, waiting for him to fail. "Would you like to walk along the river?" Daniel asked, interrupting her thoughts. "There's a covered pathway, and the lights on the water are beautiful in the rain." "I'd like that," Emma said softly. They parked near the riverfront and walked under the shelter of the promenade. The city lights reflected off the rain-rippled water, creating dancing patterns of color. Few people were out in the weather, giving them a rare moment of privacy in the busy city. "Can I ask you something, Emma?" Daniel said as they paused to watch a boat pass by. "Of course. Are you comfortable? You've seemed a bit tense all evening." Emma felt her carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. The genuine concern in his voice broke through her defenses in a way that his perfect behavior throughout the evening hadn't quite managed to do. "I need to tell you something," she said, turning to face him. "I haven't been completely honest with you tonight." Daniel's expression remained open, curious rather than accusatory. "Okay. These clothes, this whole look, it's not really me." The words tumbled out faster now. "I own a successful design firm. I have nice things. I dressed like this because I wanted to see how you'd treat me if you thought I didn't have money." She expected anger, disappointment, perhaps even amusement at her expense. Instead, Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "Can I show you something?" he finally asked, reaching for his wallet. Emma nodded, confused. Daniel pulled out a worn receipt and carefully unfolded it. "This is from the charity auction where we met. I saw you there and thought you were the most beautiful woman in the room, not because of your dress or your jewelry, but because of how you spoke to the catering staff with the same respect you gave to the millionaire donors." Emma stared at the receipt, not understanding. "I almost didn't ask for your number," Daniel continued. "I figured someone like you wouldn't be interested in someone like me. But then I overheard you talking about growing up in Westfield, the same neighborhood where my center is located. You mentioned how you'd lived in the Pine Street apartments. You knew?" Emma whispered. "You knew I grew up poor?" Daniel nodded. "I kept this receipt to remind myself that backgrounds don't define us. That sometimes people who seem worlds apart might understand each other in ways others can't." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "And tonight? You noticed my clothes?" "Of course I noticed," he said gently. "But I figured you had your reasons. Maybe you'd had a bad day, or maybe you were more comfortable this way. It didn't matter to me." "It should have mattered," Emma said, her voice breaking. "I was testing you, judging you, when all along you were just accepting me." Daniel reached out slowly and took her hand. "Emma, I grew up watching my mother wear the same 3 outfits for years so my sister and I could have new school clothes. I've seen how people treat you differently based on what you're wearing. If you needed to test me this way, you must have had your reasons." The rain fell harder around their sheltered walkway, creating a curtain of water that seemed to separate them from the rest of the world. Emma felt something shift inside her, walls she'd built over years of disappointment beginning to crumble. "I'm sorry," she said. "I've been hurt before by men who were only interested in what I could give them." "I understand," Daniel replied. "Trust has to be earned. I'm just grateful for the chance to try." He knelt down suddenly, still holding her hand, and Emma's heart nearly stopped. But instead of a ring box, he held out the crumpled receipt. "This is where I knew," he whispered, his voice breaking. "This is where I knew you were testing me, and I've never been more grateful to fail someone's test." Emma sank down beside him, no longer caring about the damp concrete beneath her knees or the tears streaming down her face. "You didn't fail," she said. "You're the only one who ever passed." 6 months later, Emma stood in front of a different mirror, in a different outfit. This time, she wore a simple white dress that she had designed herself. No extravagant beading or 10-foot train, just clean lines and beautiful fabric that made her feel like herself. Layla adjusted the small cluster of wildflowers in Emma's hair, the same varieties Daniel had brought her on their first date, now grown in abundance in the community garden they tended together. "Ready?" Layla asked. Emma nodded, thinking of the man waiting for her, not in an expensive venue, but in the community center gymnasium that they had transformed together over the past week. The same teenagers Daniel mentored had helped hang lights and arrange flowers. Emma had designed the space to feel intimate and warm, like the home they were creating together. "He's wearing the same shirt he wore on your first date," Layla said with a smile. "He said it was good luck." Emma laughed through happy tears. "And I have this," she said, touching the delicate locket around her neck. Inside was the receipt Daniel had kept, now laminated and trimmed to fit. As she walked toward her future, Emma thought about the woman who had put on cheap clothes to test a man's character. She was grateful to that woman for her caution, but even more grateful to the man who had seen beyond the test to the person beneath. Daniel waited at the end of the aisle, his eyes filled with the same warmth they'd held on that rainy night by the river. As Emma reached him, he leaned close and whispered, "You look beautiful. You always do." And Emma knew, with absolute certainty, that he would have said exactly the same thing no matter what she wore. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content that explores the deeper meanings of love and acceptance. Remember that true connection isn't about what we wear or what we own, it's about seeing each other's authentic selves and choosing to stay, even when the rain comes down.